拉斯维加斯亚商会于4月23日中午在 Gold Coast 黄金海岸赌场举办本月的午餐会，特别邀请华美银行董事长吴建民先生担任主讲嘉宾。吴董事长特别讲述了华美银行的发展历程。华美银行的前身是在1973年于洛杉矶成立的服务华裔社区的小型储贷会，在吴建民的领导之下，这家资产仅有6亿美元的储贷会迅速成长为全美最大的华资银行，目前以287亿美元总资产跻身福布斯全美100大银行前10名，市值已经逾50亿美元。在美国和大中华地区主要商业城市拥有超过130个分支机构，为太平洋两岸华人提供全方位的金融服务。吴建民在演讲中表示，为移民社区服务这一理念始终贯穿于华美银行的发展目标。当储贷会在洛杉矶中国城起步时，就致力于帮助到美国的新移民建立财务记录。新移民多从服务行业，并不是美国主流银行的放贷对象，而华美银行通过专注于华裔社区，逐渐壮大，在促进移民财务上融入美国社会的同时，也见证了自己融入美国金融主流的过程。
42 years ago, when East West Bank was first established in Chinatown, Los Angeles, at the humble beginning, it was a savings loan, and the purpose of the savings loan was formed solely because many of the new immigrants from Asia had a hard time to get mortgages from mainstream financial institutions. And because of that reason, some of the local community leaders decided that they said, we need to form our own Asian savings loan so that we could offer mortgages to these borrowers who, because they are new in the community, may not have the kind of financial, established records for years and years, so the bank would have the faith to grant their mortgage. So that's how East West Bank started. So at the beginning, we're one of the first banks in the country to offer this no-doc mortgage. Sounds kind of scary after the 2009 financial crisis, right? But what we did was we asked for these new immigrants who came to Los Angeles, or folks that work as a waiter, busboys, or groceries, packers, and we understood at that time many of them actually got their wages in cash and so forth, and they had a hard time to demonstrate that they have the financial strength to support a mortgage. So we told these folks, okay, save as much money as you can and put all your money at East West Bank. When you get enough money for a 40% down payment, we'll give you a mortgage. So we've been doing that since 1973 till today. Same old formula. Give us 40% down payment, we give you a mortgage. We don't need to see all this other stuff. Never lost a penny with these new immigrant loans. We hear a lot of problems about banks out there, that IndyMac Countrywide, they have these sort of easy doc and so forth, and then lost a lot of money, but our way of doing this no doc for these new immigrants actually were the safest loans that we got. And we also help many of the new immigrants to establish their credit through a secure credit card program. The way that we worked then was, if you put $5,000 in your passbook savings account, we'll give you $2,500 credit for your credit card, for your Visa credit card. So again, it's fully secure, but by just giving these new immigrants these secure credit cards, the mortgages, or when they buy automobiles to get around in the Southern California freeway, we also use somewhat similar formula. If you put 40–50% down payment, we get you auto loans. It worked actually beautifully. We hardly ever have any losses in the mortgages or the auto loans, and of course the secure credit card, obviously there's no losses. But just by doing that, we help these immigrants to transition, to assimilate in the mainstream American society. Because in 3 to 4 years of strong credit history at East West Bank, they were able to graduate to the larger bank like B of A, Wells Fargo, etc., etc. So East West Bank started in '73 as a savings loan, doing the same thing for the next decade, and then another decade. It was until 1990 the bank had grown to 8 to 9 branches and found that in order to continue to grow, it needs to have more capital. So the founders decided to go out and raise capital, but wasn't able to get any investment banks be willing to provide capital for a niche ethnic savings loan that the investment banker couldn't understand. So what they said that, why don't you think about selling the bank? So at that time, I was still gainfully employed at this accounting firm called Deloitte & Touche. Actually, I brought in some investor from Asia. And with that, I helped the investor to acquire East West. We paid $40 million and then bought a $600 million savings loan. So at that time, I looked at the East West and I said, interesting. The name called East West, however, seems like all our customers are in the Asian community. We only do business predominantly with the Chinese immigrants, first-generation immigrants. We hardly have any business at all outside of that ethnic Asian community. So I said, the name doesn't seem quite right. So I talked to one of the founders and asked him, and I said, why did you call it East West Bank? Well, at that time, East West Savings and Loan Association. Well, he told me, he said, well, even in the late 60s, we were dreaming about this institution. But we always have this aspiration that one day, that we will be able to not only serve the new immigrants, not only serve the second generation Asian community, but on top of that, we'll be able to transition out and be part of the mainstream community. And we'll be a true East-West bank serving as a bridge between the East and the West. And wouldn't that be great? As a financial institution who has a purpose to reach out to the West and connecting them to the East. I said, I like that. That's a great call. So when I helped the investors from Asia to help them to acquire this bank, and they made me the CEO, I decided that I need to fulfill this mission and make sure that East-West will one day to become the bridge between the East and the West. So that's how I started in 1991. So we were very fortunate. I always have to believe that whenever there are crises, that means opportunity. So in 1991, in fact, there was a lot of problem around the savings and loans industry, and we actually was able to acquire another SNL from the FDIC in San Francisco, and we merged them together. So East-West suddenly went from Southern California and reached out to Northern California, and from 600 million to become $1 billion. And from 92 to 95, most of you here in Vegas probably were totally aware that real estate market was very bad in west of Mississippi. And actually, it's not only west of Mississippi, even in New England area, particularly in California. We had the Rodney King riot, that created a lot of turmoil in the community. We also had the 1994 Northridge earthquake. So real estate market was very depressed. Most of the banks in Southern California were taking massive losses. And so East West, because we're making these immigrant loans, we actually had almost no losses. So at that time, I was able to reach out to bring in commercial bankers from the large banks. We brought in bankers from B of A, from Wells Fargo, from Security Pacific Bank, et cetera, et cetera. By bringing these commercial bankers at East West, we're able to convert the bank from the savings and loan to commercial bank. Well, now most of the savings and loan tried at one time to become a commercial bank. None of them were able to succeed, including CalFed, GlenFed, Home Savings, and all the big Quick Western and all that. They weren't able to succeed. Why? Because in general, savings and loan cater to the consumer market. And also a lot of their depositors are high savers. They tend to be senior citizens. And senior citizens like to look into investment product or savings or CDs. They're not that much into sort of starting a new business. East West was very different. Because we're predominantly serving the first generation immigrants, many of them, by design, couldn't find a job. So what did they do? They were to start their own business. So because so many of them started their own business, and we actually have a lot of small business clients, they allow us to go through an easy transition from a savings and loan to a commercial bank. We were a savings and loan, we're offering savings and loan product, but had we been a commercial bank all along, our clients would have been immediately coming to us to request for SBA loans, working capital line, or international trade finance type of products. So in '94, I actually brought in some of these bankers, international bankers from HSBC, because they shut down their West Coast operation, so I took the people in. So we were the first savings and loan doing international trade finance business. And then in 1995, we converted East West Bank from a savings loan to a commercial bank. And we continue to not only grow in the commercial banking arena, helping our first generation immigrants to take care of their financial needs when they start the new business. We also start reaching out to the mainstream. Again, there are a lot of Asian banks in Southern California, and most of them been there for a long time. And at that time, it was 20 some odd years ago, they thought, this kid from, the CPA firm didn't know anything about banking, so he was just going crazy and trying to reach out to mainstream when he had no business to be there. Because their view was, why would any mainstream customers want to do business with an Asian bank? Well, to a certain degree, I wouldn't disagree with them, because we obviously were not known in the mainstream community in California. But my thought was, at the end of the day, business folks most interested in services and value. If we can actually have a good value proposition, if we can take good care of our clients, turnaround time is faster than somebody else, and it's a little bit more flexible and more willing to listen and willing to help structure deals that may be different than a cookie cutter, we may have a shot. And at the time, East West was smaller, so it's much easier for me to be sort of like the leading lending officer. So, and it helped, with the title of President CEO. So I will be knocking on doors on many of the small, mid-sized business all over Los Angeles and San Francisco, one at a time, talking to them about, the advantage about doing business with East West, how I can offer value, and more importantly, I have a lot of connection with people in Hong Kong, Taiwan, Singapore, Indonesia. At that time, China, nobody cared about China in the early 90s. So that's the kind of things, I said, if you are interested to do a joint venture, and maybe looking into setting up supply chain in Asia, we may be able to help you. One customer at a time, we're able to convert these customers that are not in the Asian community to East West. So slowly, gradually, we're building ourselves up as the bridge between the East and the West. And then in 1998, when the investor from Asia, due to the Asian financial crisis, has some liquidity issue in Asia and needs some US dollars. So they decided they have to sell East West Bank to cash out the US dollars. So what I did was, instead of selling the bank and then start this mission of being that bridge of East and West, so I did a management buyout and brought in 150 investors, and mainly from Wall Street. And we acquired the bank from the investors, and we paid $238 million. So the initial investor from Asia actually did quite well. Got a very nice sum of return. And in the meantime, East West continued to keep status quo. But one thing that really transformed East West to another level, when I took over through this management buyout with these institutional investors from Wall Street, we made an agreement that I said that if I were able to start this new chapter of East West, I would love to see that shareholders would agree to allow me to grant stocks to every single one of our employees, including part-time teller. And every investor that I talked to, they said, what a great idea, you should do that. So starting in 1998, every single year, we grant East West stock to our employees. By doing that, I was able to look at each and every one of our staff, our associate, and said, guess what? I'm not your boss. You are my boss. I work for you because you are my shareholder. It changed the dynamic dramatically. When we have every single one of our employees that feel like that they're owner. No matter how much shares they have, when they feel like they're owner, it makes a big difference. So with that, the bank started growing in a dramatic fashion, and we were able to, in fact, in 2005, our stock price was trading at 4 times book value, and it's the highest among all banks in the country. Now, but then, of course, in 2008, because of financial crisis, everybody took a hit. We had record earnings from 1991 all the way to 2007. Every single year until 2008, we actually took losses. Because, again, with the real estate loans that we had, we took quite a hit, both in California, even in some in Nevada. But in 2009, we came back strong. We cleaned it up quickly, came back strong. And so in 2010 till now, again, every single year, we have record earnings. So the bank's doing well. And the last 5-6 years particularly, because with our presence in China, we're one of the 3 banks in the United States that actually have a license to do business in the Chinese currency, we decided to form industry specialization. We looked at industries such as, of course, real estate, which we have been doing real estate for the last 42 years, whether it's single-family mortgages, multifamily, commercial real estate with retail, commercial, warehouse, office building, etc.
吴建民董事长演讲的作风与他银行家稳健的形象相吻合，他的演讲内容精彩， 数度获得了与会嘉宾的掌声鼓励。对于2013年12月在拉斯维加斯开业的内华达分行，吴董事长有感而发地指出，因为内华达州优渥的投资环境，分行在短短的12个月当中就实现了盈余，这是非常难能可贵的。就一般银行而言，普遍都需要2到5年的时间才能够做到。这样的成绩，他特别归功于分行的优质管理。吴建民也介绍了内华达分行经理赵琴女士，他说，赵经理曾经服务于洛杉矶总部，是华美银行最优秀的经理人之一。在他的领导之下，华美银行在内华达州的成功可以说其来有致。未来内华达州的经济发展将由以特斯拉电池厂为首的高科技制造业和旅游、娱乐、地产、新能源等多种行业齐头并进。华美银行将是国内投资者在内华达的最佳金融伙伴。吴董事长演讲之后，亚商会会长 Robert Young 特别颁发了纪念奖杯给吴建民先生，感谢他专程到拉斯维加斯亚商会做午餐的演讲。这场演讲会历时约2个小时，圆满结束。
想收看更多维加斯华文短片，请浏览新闻网 lvcnn.com。谢谢。